Ohio House Bill 454, also known as the Save Adolescents from Experimentation or SAFE Act, Families, Aging, and Human Services Committee. Second hearing, May 19, 2022. Testimony by Maria Polaris of the parent group Cardinal Support Network. Proponent.
I will now call on Maria Polaris, representing Cardinal Support Network. Welcome to committee.
Thank you. To Chair Susan Manchester, Vice Chair Al Catrona, is that right? Ranking Member Cedric Denson, you are? And members of the House Family, Aging, and Human Services Committee. Thank you for having me today. I represent many, many parents, many, many mothers from Cardinal Support Network in Ohio. We're in every town and every big city in Ohio, and our biggest problem is we can't find therapists who won't affirm our kids that they're born in the wrong body, and we can't go to gender clinics because of their aggressive behavior towards us when we question these procedures. So across the board, our experience with gender clinics is about as negative as we can have them. Most of us are afraid to come forward due to fear of being harassed by the media and by activists, and they're outside today. We're a volunteer Ohio network of families of gender-confused children and young adults who are really suffering. We love our kids. We support the SAFE Act because it aligns with science and evidence-based care. Ohio needs to protect minors from the experimental practices of the gender clinics. We hope that this bill will encourage hospitals to help parents untie the knots of gender identity confusion and get to the bottom of why our children believe they are transgender, which is a negative label. Our families are seeing high desistant rates. Some of the girls are late diagnosed autistics. One, even though she's been diagnosed autistic and the misdiagnosis of the Thrive Clinic as a child, she's scheduled for top surgery in June. They don't care. He missed that. And if you want to know how he believes children should be treated, listen to his podcast, which I've quoted at the bottom, some of his really troubling statements. There's just absolutely no scientific evidence that you can be born in the wrong body, and the burden of proof sits on every gender clinic director. Not me, not anybody in this room, and they need to listen to the experts here in Ohio. The bill would protect minors, as we know, from interventions that are popular in their friend groups. They want these drugs because they hear they're going to help them. And if a gender clinic staff says it's going to help them, they think it's going to help them, so they want it. And that's what's happening to girls, mostly girls. Late last night, I had a mom in a panic. She wanted to come and be here, and she can't. So she's sending me all these screenshots of Cincinnati Children's Clinic. I've got a ton, and I'm going to send them to the whole committee. And I really would appreciate it if you would look at them, because they're not getting psychological care. They're getting drugs on the first visit. And we can prove it. Of course, the majority of these kids' issues resolve all their problems if they get to go through puberty. The Thrive director says, natural puberty is irreversible, dangerous puberty. I just couldn't believe that myself. And these detransitioners that we're going to be facing in Ohio, there's over 4,000 kids, just by their media statements, that are getting these treatments. They're not getting the psychological help they need. We're going to have a tsunami of detransitioners, so we better be ready. And guess where they don't want to go? They don't want to go back to the gender clinic, because that's who did it to them to begin with. There's just no way to know how these kids will benefit or how they won't benefit. Because the kids are walking in and saying, I'm trans. Okay, you're trans. That's how they're being treated. So we don't know how it benefits them because it's not evidence-based and it's not studied. It's all experimental. But trust me, if I knew that my daughter would benefit and if they could show me a study, I'd do it. I would do that for her. But instead, I'm unsafe because I didn't want to pay for testosterone and top surgery or bilateral mastectomy. You want to know why I still hate the idea? Because I'm a breast cancer survivor. And actually, I had bilateral mastectomy on pathologically cancerous tissue, okay? And we're doing this to young girls, healthy bodies, whose brains are not developed. They can't possibly understand this. So the bill would stop the grooming that's going on, and it's going on in schools. It's going on behind parents' backs. These girls are online. They're in their little bubbles of excitement, pretending to be boys. For them, it's real, okay? They think it's super cool. I wouldn't care so much, except that it's being medicalized now, 100% in Cincinnati. And when I saw that court statement by that doctor who was also treating my kid, I thought, oh my gosh, she's transitioning all of them. My kid's not special to them. She's a number. So we do have a group of parents who put a survey, we did a survey just to see, who are these kids? 80% of them, there's 580 parents who completed the survey. This is 2019, I didn't put that in there. 80% of them were female, mostly between the ages of 12 and 21. The average age is 14. 67% had one or more friends come out at the same time. They did it together, so the average is 3. So these girls are doing this in groups on recess. 55% had a formal mental health diagnosis prior to coming out as transgender, and most common was anxiety and depression and ADHD and ASD. 70% reported their child had experienced a major stressful event prior to the onset of GD. This could be like the death of parents, suicide of a friend or a sibling, sexual assault or physical trauma, or getting some type of serious diagnosis, medical diagnosis. And then parents reported that social transition had a huge negative effect on their child's socialization, emotional well-being, and family relationships. So these directors just state without evidence that unless parents go along with these interventions, our kids will kill themselves. And when I question it, because my daughter has a serious endocrine medical history and also a stroke history, they said to me, would you rather have a dead son or a live daughter? Or the opposite of that. Who can keep track of what they're even talking about? And I'm just like, well, I just would like to know how this is going to affect her. And then they said, you know what? Your parent's unsafe. And since she's 18, you have no say. Bye-bye. And that's true. It's true. So, and now we're reading that these 4-year-olds are self-diagnosing as transgender, and all the people around them are gaslighting them into believing that they are the opposite sex and dressing them up as the opposite sex. To me, this is just malpractice. 10 years ago, we'd be calling social services. We really would. I think we all know that here. Nobody is born in the wrong body. Has anybody met anybody that's been born in the wrong body? I would love to meet them. I really would. There's not one single person. So the misinformation that just goes on, and this really disturbs me too, because I was given a 1-page family acceptance project piece of paper. There were no studies, but all the references were Human Rights Coalition, GLSEN, FLAG, Living with Change, and Planned Parenthood now is in the game. These aren't societies. I had another parent say, what about the AMA? Well, for 40 years, the AMA let cigarettes go unaddressed with kids. That was a huge public outcry. Guess what? We're monitoring kids, aren't we? We're protecting kids. So you could read all that about the AMA. You know, and I don't want to take up a whole ton of time, so I attached a lot of documents. I would encourage everybody in this room to listen to the podcast of the Thrive Director. And late last night, I got getting all these screenshots. And if you think screenshots are okay of Cincinnati Children's and the directors nilly-willy giving out references for surgeries, they are happening. I did have one parent give me my chart review of Cincinnati Children's and how they went over all the options at 16 on a visit. So I brought some copies.
Pass them to the chair, please.
Sure.
They should
Sorry.
come through the chair. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
So that's all I have, and I just really wanted to thank you for our time, and just know that we have a lot of parents who are terrified to come here. I'm not real happy I have to be here. I don't like being here, and I just want to thank everyone.
Thank you so much for your testimony today. Are there any questions from Representative John?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much. I know it's not been easy being here, but we appreciate it, and I think it's important that the committee hear from those that are in this, dealing with these issues, especially as parents. So just to be clear, when your daughter first became distressed, she was how old?
15.
Follow up.
Follow up, yeah.
Thank you. So through the chair to the witness, thank you. And at that time, when she was an adolescent, did you feel as a parent coerced, or did you feel that you were being heard, your concerns were being heard, or did you feel like you were being pushed into a specific direction?
So at the time, I didn't know what she was up to. It wasn't until after she ran away from home that we ransacked her room, and we found business cards from a school psychologist from her high school. And it had a trans website on it that she was given to look at, and this was while she was in high school. She was also given a book to read that was optional called Middlesex, and it's about a sex change operation. It's also about incest, and she read that when she was 15. And I didn't know that. And the school psychologist told her to tell me that since she was 18, she didn't have to talk to me anymore. Nobody did. And that school psychologist was the last person she spoke to before she ran away from home and didn't return my calls.
Thank you, Chair. So just to be clear, your daughter was 15, and she approached a school psychologist, and the school psychologist did not contact you as her parent that she was in distress.
That's right.
But instead gave your daughter materials to look at that you were not aware of.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Smith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So one of the things I'm looking at, thank you for coming today to the
Thank you.
witness. One of the things I'm looking at we have a nonpartisan group called the Legislative Service Commission, and there's detailed analysis that they do on bills. And I was just noticing that one of their points here is that only a tiny percentage of the American population, I haven't verified this, I have to admit, but I'm just going to read to you what's in front of me. Only a tiny percentage of the American population experiences distress at identifying with their biological sex. According to the American Psychiatric Association, prevalence ranges from 0.005% to 0.014% for natal adult males, and all those zeros and all those percentages for natal females. And I feel like that very small population for this very, specific situation, it sounds like it's reflecting a different level of prevalence than what I'm hearing you describe in your social situation and in your circles and your, even like maybe your social media group. And so I guess what I want to say is I am concerned that what we're looking at in terms of legislation is so very broad and can be reaching, like sort of become like a government overreach into so many situations when this is really just a very rare, very specific situation. And I'm worried. I'm going to get to a question. I'm working on this. This is new for me. I'm getting to a question. And I'm worried that with this broad approach to things like, reporting children who are having questions about this, if they talk to a school teacher, I'm worried that we're going to stop children from getting the whole range of treatment that is available to them, including just at the one end of the spectrum, the psychological and counseling support. And then there's this whole other, end of the spectrum where there's actual surgical procedures. So I guess my question to you is, sorry, I'm really working through this. I guess one of my questions is, how big is your sample size when you think about the community that you're a part of? Do you know how many people are in that community?
Well,
and are they
in our-
Ohioans? Or are they outside of Ohio?
No, all our Cardinal Support Network, they're all Ohioans. They're all Ohio parents. And there's at least, I'd say, over 100 in our group that actively participate in support meetings. We have therapists that support them as well that aren't associated with any gender clinics, and they refuse to. It's kind of like saying, but it's just one girl that's getting that bilateral mastectomy. It's just one.
And so, I
So,
have a
like,
follow-up
I don't
for data
understand that.
purposes. And so the
Yeah.
follow-up would be, like, do you know within that 100, so we have 11 million Ohioans. So within the 100, do you know how many of the parents are parents of people who are under 18, who have children going through this?
Well, their clinics aren't required to give their numbers, but according to Living with
just
Change.
in your own group that you
So,
said of
like,
100.
let's
I'm
just
sorry,
say
I didn't mean to-
Cincinnati.
Let me do this the
Okay.
right way.
Let's just say Cincinnati. Living with Change, their lobby group that they partner with, said that there's 900 girls in 2019 that were receiving treatments, and the median age was 18. Does that help you?
Is there a follow-up?
I don't know, like, what you're trying to, you know.
Do you know how many of those parents are dealing with people under the age of 18 who are experiencing this challenge? I'm just trying to put all of them.
All of them.
All are under 18.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, who can't
just
find
helping me.
therapists. And what happens is the therapists they go to, they don't really want to deal with these kids, so they send them to the gender clinic. That's what happens. And then the gender clinic transitions them. That's their experience. Yeah. And it's really 40% now of girls, all the students are identifying as LGBTQ. That's just completely blossomed. It's a thing.
Representative Edwards, and then we can come back.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Chairwoman. And to hit on something that Representative Smith just said, the one range of mental health all the way to the range of hormonal treatment and starting to transition. I think, we need to start on the first end, which is the mental health side of this, which is where most of my questions stem from. You've provided a ton of examples in your testimony. I'm looking at one that is a post from November 5th, 2021 of somebody posting on the Cincinnati Children's site who says it's their first time in the clinic and they were offered hormone therapy right then and there.
Yeah.
That is very troubling to me. Do you know this person that posted this? Have you reached out to them? Do you know of others that have experienced the same thing? Because that is
Yes.
probably one of the most troubling things I'm seeing in your testimony.
Yes, in fact, I had so many parents sending me information last night at 10. I mean, I wanted to go to bed, and I just picked the most troubling one and brought it today. So yes, and I know the admin of that group also works at the Cincinnati Children's, also works for Cincinnati Children's, and typical responses that I had a whole bunch sent to me last night. We'll do whatever they want us to do. If they want surgeries, they get them. If they want puberty blockers and the parents want it, they can get them. There's really no safeguarding going on with any of these kids. We had one parent whose daughter was raped, and they tried to get her on the hormones anyway, and she wanted them to talk about the rape, not give her the hormones. So, I could write 100 statements and be here for every meeting, but I don't know that you want to see me. But, I'll come back. It's sad, but I'll be happy to supply more to the committee. I will.
Thank you. And just as a reminder to the committee members, the information that was distributed, there weren't enough copies for everyone, so we'll be happy to send that out from the chair. Representative Smith, do you have an additional question? Okay, no problem. Are there any remaining questions for the witness? Representative Click? Oh, Representative Ginter. My apologies.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your testimony. I want to commend you for coming and giving voice to your thoughts and your opinion. That is a base foundational principle and a part of America that is admired around the world. And what is troubling to me is when there is a presence of intimidation that we seem to see prevalent now in society that I have seen change since I was young. And I appreciate your willingness to come, and I encourage you, and I encourage that is what we should all be able to do, is to speak and speak civilly as you have been doing. So that's my statement. My question to you is this: hearing your story, and I appreciate you sharing it, this is a very simplistic question. Do you feel that your rights as a parent are being threatened? Is there an atmosphere of threat to your rights as a parent?
Absolutely. And, we have had parents let go custody of their kids that are identifying because the one parent will say, well, I affirm this our child, and the other parent isn't comfortable with it. And so it is being used as a carrot in a divorce proceedings. And a lot of these parents don't have the money to fight it. And if the kid doesn't want to live with them and is mad that they won't affirm them, then why would they clean their bank account out to keep custody only to fight it? That's what these parents are being faced with. They're being faced with, okay, I got 5 kids, and I got this one who hates my guts and doesn't want to live with me and wants to go with the dad because he'll give her what she wants. I mean, this happens for many, many years for many reasons, but I'm definitely not the cool parent. I can tell you, I'm completely uncool and outdated, and I think I'm a TERF and a transphobe. That's what I've heard. So,
Follow up?
Yes, you are categorized as that, and probably much more, simply because you hold a different opinion, even though your opinion is not based upon hatred, it's based upon compassion and care. Is that a correct summary?
Absolutely. Parents know their kids better than anybody. They know their backgrounds, they know their medical histories. And when you bring your child to the pediatrician, they want to know all that. When you have your baby, they want to know everything because they want to watch out for mental health issues, anything like that. But when they identify as transgender, they could have cared less. I did file a complaint with the Ohio State Medical Board because I thought, what else can I do? They won't listen to me, and I don't want my child to suffer. I love her, but she's been told that I'm unsafe because I'm questioning testosterone shots, which isn't even approved for men.
Thanks, Chair.
Are there any additional questions for the witness? Representative Liston?
I apologize. It's quick, actually, so thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I'm just going through this document, sort of the 34 pages, and I want to clarify. What I'm seeing is sort of a compilation of all of the gender clinic information
Not
in
all
the
of
state?
them, only two. The two big monsters.
I mean, I'm
There's
seeing
seven.
Cleveland, Cincinnati, Ohio State, or Nationwide Children's.
Oh,
I'm
you've
seeing
got the big one.
Equitas.
Oh, yeah, okay, yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I forgot
Just
about
want to
the
make sure,
big one.
because it's a lot of information, but what it seems to be is sort of cut and paste from their websites and the information that they present publicly
Mm-hmm.
for us to look at and see and sort of judge overall. And then there are links to those specific sites.
Right.
Right, okay. Just want to make sure that I was interpreting what we received correctly. So, thank you.
Another thing to notice is that these kids that come out, they usually come out as gay or lesbian first, and then they're tormented and teased, and then they come out as trans after that.
Follow up.
Follow up?
Oh, thank you. So I kind of went along that lines, and you mentioned you had not met someone that, from your perspective, was born in the wrong body. Do you?
Have
Do you,
you?
do you think that trans individuals exist? Like someone who's truly
I think-
trans?
Yeah, well, I think male and female children exist, and I think they're very troubled, and I think trans is a horrible, negative label on children, and I don't think it's right. Because if you call a kid trans, it makes everyone around them assume that they are going to transition. Would you agree with that?
So, but to that end, those individuals that identify themselves as being a trans woman or trans man, you don't believe that they are correct. You believe that
I believe they
that does not
exist.
exist.
I believe they identify, and I believe they should express themselves the way they want to, especially adults. But I don't believe that we should be pushing that on children, do you? The Thrive Clinic does think so. He does believe that we should teach kids about this, and he also believes that every pediatrician should screen for gender identity. He actually believes I have a gender identity, which is cis. That's a label on me. I don't like it as a woman. It's nasty. I don't. Do you like that? Being labeled? We're male and females.
Thank you.
Are there any additional questions for the witness? Representative Click?
Ms. Polaris, thank you so much for coming in today and for bearing your heart. So the first thing I have a list of several questions for you, but I think the first thing I just want to ask you, because people who have our position often get accused of being haters. So are you motivated by hate for your daughter or love for your daughter?
I'm motivated by love, which is why I'm so upset, and I cry myself to sleep a lot of nights. You know, if I didn't care about her, I'd just be in the parades with her, say, you go right ahead. But, you know, most kids don't want to be in parades. They're just confused. They just want help.
Very good.
Follow up?
Well, thank you. So sometimes we hear, and I'd like to get your response to this, because I've talked to some counselors and guidance counselors and so forth, and you attest to the fact that your daughter was being counseled without your knowledge from the age of 15. So she'll be, even though she made her transition at 18, she was prepared for this by the school guidance counselor. And sometimes people talk to me about, well, you're coming between parents and their children. Do you feel like the school guidance counselor was coming between you and your child, number one, and number two, they have told me it would be unethical to tell the parents? What would your response to those things be?
Well, first of all, I would consider it grooming to tell any child that they were born in the wrong body and that they should change their body and that they can change their body with drugs. So I think that's inauthentic, you know. That's one of their favorite words. So I guess it just depends. I do know that right now one of our parents who's a police officer said that if a child in Ohio calls the police and says they're feeling unsafe because their parents aren't using their pronouns, that they can go into that home and address it as abuse. And he actually lost custody of his child who was identifying, so he ought to know. So, you know, I think if a person says, I have a 5-year-old who's really, a biological male who is a trans girl. I do think there's family troubles that could be happening. There's a really good article on the Cardinal Support Network website about that, you could even ask Walter Heyer. His grandmother dressed him up as a little girl, and that was considered abuse back then. And he transitioned and then later regretted it. So, I just would have liked to have been asked, especially when there were so many things that happened to her that they knew about, traumas and medical issues. And, she was on depressive meds. So obviously when you're on depressive meds, you're not thinking clearly. It's considered a mental illness. So, I know that there was a second girl that the same school treated the same way, and she's on her way to being transitioned. So, what they say is that your parents just don't understand. Your parents are the problem. And every teenage girl would totally agree.
Follow up.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and through the Chair to Ms. Polaris. I've noticed that some of these posts on this, and this is if I'm correct, this is the Cincinnati Gender Clinics. It's their page. There's those people
right.
in there who are interacting, who are their customers,
Right.
who are interacting. And there are some comments in there about references to doctors who will perform surgery on the minors, whether, I don't know if it's the penile inversions, if it's the bilateral mastectomies, and there's a name of Dr. See, I tried to write it down, like a doctor, I think it's Robinson, maybe? Stephen Robinson. Who is he? Where does he, is he at the clinic? Is he a private practice? Who is he?
He's who they refer to. So, there's not a lot of surgeons that want to do this sort of thing, and they don't advertise it on their websites either. I don't know why it's so exciting to do that. But, sorry, I'm being sarcastic, and I've been told sarcasm hurts. And there's some adult, I would say trans men, being respectful, that he has operated on, and they consider him a hack.
Wow.
So, and they've come out and said it yearly. I'm coming out to say, do not send anybody to, don't go to this person. He's terrible. But Cincinnati Children's refers to him. And so, they can say they personally aren't doing the surgeries. I know they do reconstructive surgery. I looked it up last night. Who knows what that means. But, I think it's troubling and it's traumatic. Any breast cancer survivor will tell you that, yes, there's reconstruction, but you can't get them back, like Olson Kennedy says. You can't just wave a wand. And honestly, if I could change anything in this bill, it would be for anybody detransitioner, who wants damages, for all of that to be restored and by the person of that person's choice, not affiliated with Children's. I really think we need to start thinking about that in Ohio.
Are there any additional questions for the witness? One additional from Representative Click.
Well, I hope you'll be patient and give me a couple.
Yeah.
So I'm looking. I'm sorry?
Did I answer your question?
You were close.
Okay,
I won't press it. It's not a court of law. I'm looking on here, and I kind of have an issue with this. I'm looking at Cincinnati Children's Hospital, and one of their providers is a person named Cardinal Cass, who is transgendered himself. And do you think that's an ethical issue for someone who is transgendered to be counseling other people? Do they have a built-in bias for this, or can they be objective for a person? What would you, since you shared that information, what would your view on that be?
My view is no, because that person's a social worker, and these social workers have a lot of power. All the kid has to go is say, "Hey, my dad's not going along with this, and I want my cross-sex hormones," and he won't go along with it. So, Sensei Children showed up in a court case against parents. And basically, the dad and mom didn't want to give the hormones, and the social worker was right there to get that moving to make sure she got the hormones, and they lost the case. So it's just shameful. Clinics that show up against parents, no wonder nobody wants to go down there.
Follow
I
up?
have 2 more questions,
Okay,
Chair.
thank you, Representative Click.
This is important. I sure appreciate your patience, and you've been patient with everybody on both sides of the aisle in this, and I sure appreciate that. Number one, so just 2 questions. Is there anyone, because again, this is being portrayed by some folks as anti-LGBT and that we hate people, which we love people, which is why we're doing this. But do you have anyone that's a part of the LGBT community that is a part of the Cardinal Support Network?
Yes, our co-founder is an L.
Okay.
Yes.
Expand a little. Tell us her story.
Her daughter actually came out as transgender, and we met through Parents of RGD Kids. So Parents of RGD Kids is how we formed, and they just gathered parents from around the world, and they put us in geographical areas, and she and I became friends first. So at the time, her daughter was identifying, and so was mine. And it was very distressing for her because she couldn't say anything at work about it. It was very quiet. She uses a different name because she's still worried about being fired because some of her associates actually give out the drugs to these kids. So she's really in a tough spot. And finally, she found a therapist, and she was able to desist. So the girl's got a boyfriend now, and she's straight, which we all need to be thinking about. These kids don't know what's going on with their straightness, their gayness. And a lot of these girls post-transition are saying, oh my gosh, I'm a lesbian, and I hated myself, and I didn't know why I hated myself. So, we need to take that, instead of saying gender identity and sexual orientation, maybe we need to ask these kids and say, hey, do you think you're gay? Are you having a same-sex attraction? You need to accept yourself and not medicalize yourself because you hate what's going on, and really teach them how to be self-esteem kids where they aren't teased at school, and that's where the teachers, I think, could really help, is say, hey, no, you're not trapped in their own body. You're a great kid. You could be gay or lesbian or bisexual, and maybe you need to think about that. Maybe you need to wait and just see how things go. And that's where I think psychologists could really help, because they're saying a third of these kids that detransition are saying that they were gay or lesbian.
Final question, Representative Clay?
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you so much, Chair. And I think there's just as a follow-up that leads into the next question is, you don't have to medicalize yourself to be gay or lesbian.
No.
There's no physical risk or no physical damage that happens to that, like it does when you begin to affirm the dysphoria and take the hormones and so forth. And that leads to, you mentioned ROGD. And I know the numbers used to be that this was prevalent M to F, a male to female, and now, as you noted, it is more prevalent female to male, and Dr. Lisa Littman has coined that phrase ROGD, rapid onset gender dysphoria. Could you expound on that and how that is affecting our young ladies?
Sure. So there's early onset gender dysphoria, which mainly affects young boys, and those boys usually would grow up to be gay adults. And then the late onset, or the teenagers who don't have any hint of this, who love dresses, they're very feminine, they get told that maybe if they like math or Legos or being dirty, getting out in the dirt, maybe they like other girls. Maybe that means they're trans, or video games makes them trans. So the sex stereotyping that goes on with this is just shameful in this day and age. It's all based on sex stereotypes. So a boy who loves his mom and likes to dress feminine, that doesn't make him a girl, If he loves, to do knitting and crocheting and all that stuff, it doesn't make him a girl. It makes him a feminine man, a loving man. Maybe these are our future doctors, that we're medicalizing, and they're just exploring themselves. And I think kids should be able to explore without medicalizing.
Are there any additional questions for the witness? I will just advise members, we do have 4 more witnesses, so we'll
Okay.
get to these questions quickly. Representative Liston? Okay, Representative Smith?
I'll try to be quick.
Am I
I
done?
know we're all tired, and this is a
okay.
long thing for a small, maybe not often occurring situation. So thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you to the witness. So I just want to say a couple things. So you stated that you have the belief that kids should be able to get counseling at the start of this, and maybe they should be asked, maybe you're gay, maybe you're not trans.
I don't think they should be asked any of that stuff.
Oh, I thought you said that. Okay, so thank you for clarifying that.
I mean, if they're identifying as trans, I think exploring that is good, yeah, but not just blanket asking every kid that on the street.
Okay, so as I just want to say, I just want to make sure that we're not accidentally spreading misinformation. My understanding, and actually in your testimony that you gave us, this is a report from someone who dealt with your child, is that correct?
No.
Oh, what is
No.
this?
That is a My Chart summary of one of our parents whose daughter was seen by Cincinnati Children's Hospital.
Thank you. So
Yeah.
I'm going to try to rush it along. I'm so sorry. I know
And
everybody's
those
tired.
are all the options they gave her.
So what's so helpful about it to me is that it proves exactly what my research says, which is that there's always a very careful, conscious, long, slow, deliberative process. And this even says that that this person who treated the child, just jumping to the middle of it, they discussed a whole range of things that the child could
wanna-
consider. And I don't know
wanna
if
read
this is a
it?
child or an adult, but so it says we discussed the full menu of options, including presenting as another gender. So to be
reading.
clear, wait,
should keep
I'm so-
reading
hold on,
that,
hold on,
right?
hold on, hold on.
There's a lot
So
there.
what that means is no medical intervention. That means like wearing a different kind of clothing. And so that is the standard of care that all of my research has told me always happens in all of these cases. And so this piece of testimony that you gave us supports that. So I just want to be sort of clear about what the norm is versus the outliers. And so that's what I have seen in my research. But my question is, if you believe that kids should, have some kind of counseling to help them through all this, do you believe that even if the child is in possibly a situation where there's physical abuse, where they could face violence for being outed, do you believe that counselors, whether they're at school or anywhere else, should be required, as they would be under this bill, to out the child, even if that child was in a home where they've been threatened with physical abuse or faced it in the past? That's one of my worries about this bill. So do you believe that a counselor or health professional should always have to report to the parents that a child was even asking questions about these issues, even if it could result in violence for the child or them being kicked out of their home, which happens to a lot of LGBTQ kids? It's an important consequence that we need to think about. So I just want to know what your feeling is on that, and then I'll be done.
So the purpose of, let me just start with the document you referenced. The reason the parent gave me this document was because she was told to leave the room.
Madam
and
Chair,
I'm
point of
sorry.
order. May I ask
One
for-
moment.
Yes.
What is your question?
My question is
which was
regarding, you
discussing-
talked about therapy and counseling and teachers that were involved in your own child's experience. And because you're not a medical professional or a legal professional, I want to ask you about your own experience. It sounds like your child was very fortunate. We haven't talked about violence in your home, right? But if the child was in a different situation where they had faced violence in the past, where they have been threatened with violence, and if they could even be kicked out of their home, which we know happens, there are lots of homeless LGBTQ youth. I'm just asking you, do you still think that we should keep the piece of this bill that says all adults, including school counselors, should be forced to report to parents this private questioning that a child has?
So there's just a
may
lot
I-
of questions there in one sentence.
Well,
So
it's
the
about
answer
reporting,
would be
Madam
yes.
Chair. Is it
okay.
appropriate to ask for a yes or no?
just
Let's
gonna say
please
yes.
ask the question. The question is, do you support that part?
Yes.
And I would like the witness to be able to answer the question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And I would encourage everybody to read the entire My Chart summary, which was left out that the child who was 16, and I didn't mention that because I just got this last night, the parent was upset because the child was offered presenting as another sex, using hormone blockers to stop puberty and give the patient more time to know who they are, taking hormones to help transition to another sex, making that child believe you can transition to the opposite sex, bottom surgery, top surgery, all of it was offered to a child on the table in one meeting.
That's not what it says.
So I'm sorry that doesn't make sense to you, and I'm sorry that
Madam Chair.
it's the
Chair.
truth, but this is what's going on at Children's.
Madam Chair, so regarding.
So just
Counsel-
one moment, please. All questions and answers need to be directed through the chair.
Through the chair,
And
I
I want to
apologize,
make
I haven't
sure
done it once. Sorry.
it's fine. We're a very grace-giving crew here, but I just don't want there to be this back and forth between
Yeah,
witnesses and
I
the
agree.
questions. So I ask that you please address through the chair. Whenever you ask a follow-up question, I feel that I've been very generous with the follow-ups, and I would ask, does the witness have anything additional that you wanted to say?
No, I would like to be excused.
I think it's time that we end this portion of the hearing. Thank you very much for your time today. We appreciate it.